Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the enormous risks to Rishi Sunak and the Tories in general of having to go through the May 2nd local and mayoral elections if the general election has not already been called by then. There are some who think that the Tories, if they delay the election and the local election results are disastrous, that it could be the last straw for the party and Sunak could be made to walk the plank. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So I've talked a bit about the prospect of a May 2nd general election, or maybe even a little earlier, maybe right at the end of April. But let's do a little bit of a sort of a proof by contradiction. Let's assume that Sunak is not intending to call the election by the end of this month, which is what he'd need to do if he's going to have that election on May the 2nd or earlier. Because there may or may not be a general election this May, but there are definitely going to be local and mayoral elections. And two of the mayoral elections are going to be fairly high profile. Mayor of London, of course, where the Tories seem to have chosen pretty much the worst candidate they could have come up with. So, yeah, despite rigging the electoral system in their favour, they are likely to lose very badly. And then, of course, the Tees Valley mayoral election, which is at the centre of the Freeport scandal storm. And there are serious accusations of very dodgy behaviour where the Teesside Freeport's concerned. And replacing the Conservative mayor with a Labour one could mean that serious scrutiny of the project can begin sooner rather than later. But it is the local elections which pose the greatest danger to Sunak personally. In last year's local elections, the Tories suffered greater than expected losses. So the Tories, they were thinking to themselves in reality, they thought, oh, we'll probably lose about 600 council seats here. So then they put about the story that they were going to lose about 800. To expectation management, they said, oh, we'll lose about 800, so that when they lost about 600, it looked like a good result. In the event, they lost over 1,000. So it was worse than even their expectation management. The Labour, the Lib Dems, the Greens all made hefty gains. Sunak's detractors were out in force to oust him. But at the time, most Tory MPs realised, look, we ain't got anyone else. And he's only been in post for about half a year. Give him time. Well, with this year's local elections, he will have been Prime Minister for a year and a half. Also, if Tory MPs are not absolutely dead set on keeping him in place, they will be running out of time. So if they think that maybe a change of leader will restore their fortunes, or at least significantly reduce the damage, then they will have to act very quickly after those local elections. So the local elections could, in theory, be a trigger. There are some who think that a really bad set of local election results, not net losses, that's going to be factored in, but a really bad, bruising set of local election results could finish him off. I'm not so sure personally, because I still think his main opponents, particularly on the right of the party, they're too disunited. They don't seem to be backing a candidate. There's no one emerging. Like, who are they going to get behind? Suella Braverman? There's actually quite a lot of them that hate her. They're not going to give Liz Truss another go. Kemi Badenoch sniffing around, Priti Patel sniffing around. But they haven't really formed behind anyone. But we'll see. So the big question is, so what are the prospects of Sunak getting a reasonable set of results in the local election this year? The answer is absolutely zero. And I don't just mean because last year they did even worse than they expected. And it was, there's several reasons for that. And I don't just mean because, there's an increasing number of long-term Conservative voters who say now that they're not going to vote Conservative. Some are saying they're never going to vote for them again. That's how bad things are. This year, the Tories are going to be the victims of their own success. See, if you take the 2022 local elections just as a little example of how it sort of flipped for Labour. Labour made gains in 2022. And the Tories under Boris Johnson at the same time made severe losses. But a lot of people were unimpressed with Labour's gains. Oh, they didn't gain very much, did they? They expected much more. And what I tried to explain is what they failed to take into account is the 2022 local elections, the last time most of those seats were run was in 2018, when Labour had a really good year. They did well. So when you've already won a lot of the seats, you can't really make a lot of gains the next time. Well, the same thing's going to happen to the Tories ramped up to 11, because the last time this year's local election seats were contested, sort of by-elections aside, was 2021. It was delayed. It was supposed to be 2020, delayed by the pandemic. So 2021. In May 2021, the Tories were enjoying their vaccine bounce still. In fact, the first half of 2021 was by and large an excellent period for the Conservative Party, which ended pretty much at the end of that first half of the year, and it's all been downhill for them since. You know, despite being in power for 11 years at this point, they actually made gains. The public thought, oh, they're doing really well with the pandemic now. And this was remarkable because a significant number of people, they do tend to vote against the party of government in local elections because they don't take the election of councillors seriously. So they see it as a free hit, a way like, you know, they'll think to themselves, well, we'll still vote for them in the general election, but we just want to send them a message. You know, we just want to keep them honest. You know, they could try a bit harder. We'll send them a message to make them try a bit harder. So when Johnson's Tories actually gained control, a net increase of control of 13 councils and a net gain of 235 councillors, when Labour lost councils and councillors quite heavily, it was a brilliant result for the Conservatives. But it has made a rod for their own backs now. Because Labour took heavy losses and because the Tories made spectacular gains in 2021, they are now set up for an epic fail this May. At the time of the 2021 local elections, the Conservatives were polling 10 points ahead of Labour, according to YouGov. Now Labour are leading them by 26. Now that's national polling. These local elections are not across the whole country. They're just in certain parts of the country. But the Tories are still expected to get an absolute pummeling. Just consider the major factors at play here. First, Labour are saying that the general election is definitely going to be on May 2nd. Jonathan Ashworth bet a tenner on it yesterday, apparently, which is a bit weak. I've bet 100 quid on it, mate. Come on. But in reality, Labour don't know whether the election is going to be in May or not, right? Because it's not up to them. It's up to Rishi Sunak. But they're saying it's definitely going to be in May, because then if the election isn't called for May, they can say Sunak bottled it and is running scared from the electorate. And this is a sentiment which is likely to be shared by some voters who, if they don't get the general election that polling indicates the vast majority want, may well turn up for the local elections and punish the Tories for it. Second, even without the country being a broken mess, like even if the country's sort of all right and the government's sort of doing all right, it is still usual for some voters to go, well, you could do better. You could do better. So some voters will still send a message by voting against the national party, the party of national government. And you know, people this year, I think, will want to send a very loud message indeed. Third, the Tories are really bad at campaigning at the moment. Over the past couple of years, they just haven't been able to get any of their like big beasts out persuading the public. They either can't be bothered or they're just useless. Rishi Sunak himself often hides away. Like, what's he going to do? Is he going to nip out to be photographed looking at potholes again, like last year? So even with everything else working against them, the Tories just don't have any big guns on their campaign wagon. It's going to be down to local activists. And fourth, as I say, the results for the Conservatives were so good in 2021 that it's just going to make their losses look way worse this year. Because in a sense, like if we're being sensible, it shouldn't, you know, if you're going to judge the local election results, it shouldn't matter what you got last time. If we're being sensible, we should be judging local elections by the total number of council seats you win and the total number of councils you have control of when the results are published. But that's not what people pay attention to. The media and the wider public always look at net gains and losses. Because if we're honest, most people don't treat local elections seriously. They are serious. It does matter who runs your local services. But most people are focused on the national government and they see local elections as a sign of where the next government election is going. So we have a focus on gains and losses, which is going to bite the Tories on the arse good and hard this year. Now, I don't know what the feeling of Tory MPs is in private. Like sometimes I'll read a report, some correspondent who will be talking to these MPs in the bar and they'll report something and you think, but I don't know whether you're talking about 100 MPs or just like 3. So I don't really know what the mood is. But if Sunak doesn't call the general election for May, and if Tory MPs are thinking, right, we're just going to give him one more chance with the local elections, then he's in a lot of trouble. Because unless the party has basically already committed to keeping him, no matter what, before the election, there's no way these local election results will be seen as anything other than a sign that Sunak has utterly failed. It's understood that local elections are not a happy time for the party of government. But then that's why it is common to hold the general election on the same day as the local elections that year. Because it means people don't then feel the need to vote against the ruling party in the local elections to send a message. They don't need to. They get to exercise their say on the national government in the general election. So it's always a brave move to hold a general election after the local elections of the same year. And in politics, for brave, read stupid. So when the results are published on May the 3rd this year, if we're not finding out that Keir Starmer is Prime Minister, we are definitely going to be hearing from a lot of Conservatives that it at least should no longer be Rishi Sunak, because the results are going to be absolutely dire for the Tories. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.